Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Acing the Application Process for Accelerators. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a Director of Programs at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So check out those resources and links in the chat. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Firstly, let us know where you're dialing in from if you haven't already. Secondly, we're going to open up for live Q&A near the end of the event, so please submit those questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout our discussion. We'll try our best to get to them all. Now, none of what we do here at the center would be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, BMO, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, BPM, HubSpot for Startups, and Google Cloud. We're humbled by their contributions and hope you're grateful too. Before we get started, I'm going to launch a couple of polls to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how we're all doing today. The first poll, how are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic, surviving, a little anxious? We use this information to inform the wellness and additional support we provide for you, the entrepreneurs out there in our community. So take a second. We appreciate you participating. Let's see, we've got Nigeria, Atlanta. Oh, happy Friday. Happy Friday indeed. Central Florida, Philadelphia. All right, St. Louis. All over. All right, so I'm going to end this poll, share those results. Looks like optimism is in the lead, but there's a little bit of anxiety and survival mode out there. So hopefully our presentation today and the future ones will help with those sentiments. Second poll, what's keeping you up at night? We use this direct information to guide the goalposts that we're going to be putting on for the next couple of months of programming. So appreciate you. Looks like finance is in the lead, but there's a pretty good mix here. Thanks for voting. All righty. Share those results. Finance is at the top of the key, followed by a good mix of sales, marketing, scale, pivot, and a little bit of team. So thank you for participating. And without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guests in the chat. Jules Walker is a managing director at KPMG's emerging technology practice, and Donna Pawar, founder and CPO of Veritempo and a NASDAQ Center Advisory Board member. Jules and Donna, so happy to see you. Happy Friday. And over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Colin. I'm very, very excited to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to see people are overall positive. Great to see everyone joining from across the globe. And finance is top of everyone's mind, so you're in the right place. So like Colin said, I'm Dana Pawar. I'm very excited to moderate this event with the brilliant Jules Walker. I am the co-founder and chief product officer at Veritempo Labs, where we invest in and work with startups from ideation to launch. I have also had the honor of being on the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center's advisory board since the very beginning, since its inception in 2014. And I want to hand it over to Jules. Jules, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Donna. And you made me blush, so thank you for that. It was kind of cool. I think it's the first time when I've seen Colin ask for where everybody's from. We got an input from an AI assistant, so that's a first and fun. And I think the future, right? So quickly, my name is Jules Walker. I'm a managing director with KPMG, specifically in our private enterprise practice. You can see over my shoulder. Which is our group that focuses on private companies from two guys in a garage up through IPO, and work with them to provide 300 different products and services that KPMG could provide. Also, I wear a couple different hats. I also am an active mentor in the Milestones Maker program. I think, Donna, also since the beginning. And looking forward, I think they just selected the latest cohort. I'm looking forward to working with a brand new CEO and startup. That's going to always exciting for me. And then finally, and I think it's going to come up, a QR code and such, KPMG has a pitch competition. We call it our Global Tech Innovators Pitch Competition. And what that is, Right now, we are gathering in applications for US applicants. So click that link there and sign up. We're going to collect all those applications, review them, identify a top 10, and then that group of top 10 are going to pitch in front of a panel of VCs in August. Winner of that, we are sending to Lisbon to go to Web Summit and compete against 24 other country winners around the world. So KPMG entities around the world are also putting together a winner. And at Lisbon, at Web Summit in November, we're going to pick our global winner. So I ask everybody to hit the link, apply. Make sure you tell them Jules sent you, and hope to see your application and that you make the top 10. With that done, I'll turn it back over to you.
I cannot emphasize what an amazing opportunity this is. And I do encourage everyone to take a look at it and apply. So we have so much to unpack today. So without further ado, let's get into it. I wanted to kick us off with a fascinating data point where, as per an HBS study, only 5 to 10% of startups actually get accepted into accelerators or top accelerators. But those that do get in raise 50 to 170% more from investors and were more likely to get acquired, right? So this truly highlights the importance of a strong, well thought out application, which is why I'm so excited to have you, Jules, share your learnings and insights on what makes for a compelling application. And for those listening, I know Colin said this before, but we will reserve time for Q&A, and I would love to have your questions as well. Unfortunately, this is not a live Q&A right now, but at the end of the session, I hope this to be more interactive. So, Jules, I'm going to start with the classic 4 pillars of a company: team, product, market, and traction. How do accelerators weigh between these while reviewing an application? Is it an even split? Is one more important than the other, and why?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts there. Traction of the 4, traction, I would say, is either the most important or the least important. It depends on the accelerator. Some accelerators are just come in with a concept and it will help you build the company, ultimately build traction. So it may be a non-starter there. The others are probably equally weighted: product, market, team, right? Those are the other 3. Everybody always talks about team, and different accelerators focus on that more. But end of the day, if you don't have the right team together, starting with the entrepreneur, you're not going to get a shot. It's just the reality of it. Product, I would also bucket with traction. It may or may not be important at this point in the application process. And then ultimately market, I would say, is the most important. Are you addressing something? Is it change the world stuff, or more arguably just as important, is it a big money maker? We see a huge opportunity here. So I would probably put market first, team second, product, traction, depending on the program you're trying to get into.
Yeah, no, and 100% agree. I invested in a company only for the team, and there were 2 incredible co-founders, and turns out they were, high school friends and had a fallout, and the team imploded and the company imploded, right? But the market was amazing, and that's what they went off and did bigger things separately. But I do agree, market is for me the number 1 as well. So there are so many criteria, right, and parts to an application that the accelerator selection committee looks for. Things like proven track record, passion, hustle, vision. There's just so much, right? So what do you think are good examples of criteria or attributes that tend to impress an accelerator selection committee?
One of the things that draws my eye, if you will, to an application is if the person or people that are applying, that are leading the show for that company, have experienced the pain that they're trying to address. So if it's a doctor or a nurse and they have a healthcare company and they're trying to address a problem in healthcare, instant credibility, right? If you have a background in logistics and your startup is trying to address some supply chain issue, instant credibility. So that's really important to me. And that's what draws me more to that application. It's going to move them to the top of the pile.
Cool. That's awesome. Makes total sense. And then going back to the market topic, right? We talked market being the most important, and we've all heard this ever so often, whether you're a venture capitalist or whether you're part of an accelerator. Everybody wants a huge market, massive opportunity, right? Like that, those are the common terms we hear. So what strategies can entrepreneurs use to demonstrate their own market potential and differentiation as well? Because if it is a big market, obviously it's crowded as well. So how did they demonstrate the potential for their company?
A lot of this, and this is going to be an underlying answer to a lot of our probably back and forth today, is knowing your market. How well do you know it? Going back to what I said previously, if you come out of an industry, I expect you would know the market. But just if you're not a player in that industry, but you see a problem, what kind of research have you done? Do you really understand it? Have you articulated a problem that you are addressing? And along with that, do you know the competition? I think there's a big problem in search. Okay, well, we have Google that has 85% of the market. Are you really going after that? Or, you know, that kind of thinking. So it's understanding and the ability to articulate a problem that you're addressing so that I can understand it when I'm analyzing your application.
And you're spot on, right? I mean, the number one advice I give entrepreneurs is never say you have no competition. It might be an orthogonal company, but never say you have no competition, because A, most times it's not true. And B, if there is no competition, it's going to, me as an investor or an accelerator, I'm going to think about, then why is there even a market for this, right? So
yeah, I immediately discount it if somebody says there's no competition. We are one of one. Like, no, you're not.
Exactly. And maybe I'll just add one more thing, in terms of differentiator. One of my favorite examples is the Dollar Shave Club. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the Dollar Shave Club. This is weird ad that the CEO created where he sits, in the warehouse, and it's just hilarious. And I think what I love is you would never think of razors as a massive opportunity for a startup because it's already been dominated by Procter & Gamble and just so many big players in the market, right? But he took a mundane market, razors, he took the price point to down to like $1, which hence the Dollar Shave Club. And, razors are very expensive. So he took an undeserved audience, a large market, although super saturated, and just had fun with it. Like he went completely on like, let's go crazy with this idea in terms of how to create an ad and get the word out. So there's always ways to differentiate yourself, even in a very crowded market that is very large.
Yeah, it's a great example. I am a customer of his or of them now.
So fun.
And he used marketing specifically, what you're describing, as his differentiator. It was price and marketing, and it was a quality product. So all those things obviously are important in every startup. Not price, but quality product and a differentiator. And he just went for it and carved out enough of a market that he was able to sell for hundreds of thousands, if not billions, I think.
$1 billion, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about scale. So typically accelerators are not looking for a flash in the pan, right? They want companies or startups that are poised for massive scale, because that's how they're going to get investment for the companies, and the investors are going to get their money back. So how do the accelerators assess the long-term viability of a startup's business model during the application process, especially when you're so early stage? How does the accelerator actually suss that out in terms of how sustainable a company is?
Again, similar theme. You have to be able to articulate your market. I'm not going to be an expert in your market, most likely. So explain to me what the problem is, what the market is you're addressing, and why you have a better mousetrap. Ultimately, that's what's going to drive every conversation here. And you need to be able to articulate that. That is probably the most important thing. I mean, maybe I'm jumping ahead to what's the most important thing, but the most important thing when applying to a program is, can you articulate the problem and the solution and why your solution is better? And scale just kind of plays into that. You're articulating a problem today. This is a much bigger problem, and we'll probably talk about projections a little bit later, but you need to be able to explain why this is what I'm addressing today. This is my growth strategy, whether it's domestic, international, and this is how it's going to scale and change the world.
So since you've been, obviously the number one underlying theme here is communication, storytelling, right? How you craft your story and how you get your point across. That's kind of the underlying theme across all of our responses today, right? So you probably have seen countless pitches. What role does the quality of a pitch play in the evaluation process? And any tips, tricks for applicants to craft a winning pitch that stands out?
Yeah, I love this question because it's so critical. And it's not a critical point that people talk about because it really comes down to human nature. And the reality is, if I am judging a number of pitches, if one is clearly just polished and got it down, he or she is going to stand out amongst the group. It's again just human nature as judges in these situations. So first thing is practice, practice, practice. Know your pitch, get it down. Inevitably, when we're talking about a pitch, well, so I'm interchanging pitch versus application, slightly different, but we're talking about pitch here. If it's a 3-minute pitch, it's a 10-minute pitch. Have your 3-minute pitch ready. We've all been in situations where we're watching somebody perform a pitch and they're on slide 5 and you could see it's an 8-slide deck and they hit the 3-minute mark, they get shut down or they have to stop. And you know there was information in those last 3 slides they really want to get to and they didn't. So practice, don't get bogged down in detail. I find a lot of pitches dig into the team slide, which is an important one, but it's also there on the screen. People can see the background of your team if you have it positioned that way. You don't have to repeat the words that are on there over and over again. So primary thing is practice, 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 and practice in front of an audience. It could be colleagues, it could be family, but get used to doing that. And if it's a 3-minute pitch, plan they're going to shut you off at the 3:01 mark and be ready for that. The ones that often stand out to me are when they hit the mark perfectly at that 3-minute mark in that example. It's impressive and it shows me that they practiced and they put time and effort to this. But back to the original premise, you got to be polished. I've also seen a lot of pitches where they're stuttering, not stuttering like a disability, but just staggering with their words. Their thoughts aren't coherent, and I'm embarrassed for them because it's not going to work. They are not going to advance in whatever competition they're trying to do or in whatever process. You got to get it down. That's probably the main thing.
Yeah, and the beauty of this is, right, if you're part of an accelerator, if you're even pitching to an accelerator, the accelerator themselves actually have coaches now, right? There's just so many resources. There's templates online that you can find for a perfect pitch. You can actually use the coaches that are available to you or the help that is available to you from the accelerators themselves to practice your pitch. And I could not agree more, right? Even Steve Jobs, I mean, people thought, oh, he was a natural born speaker and he just aced his presentations at all these big events, but he actually practiced like crazy. And that was his secret to success, right? So I agree with you, practice is the number one, and there's just so many resources.
And I will say, just as an example, last year's winner, I mentioned our GTI competition, the winner last year from the US, the judges were not sure about him versus another one, but he was so polished in his pitch. That's what made him rise to the top, and he was our ultimate winner, and we sent him to Lisbon.
Yeah. I mean, and the fact that there's this data, the stat that says your funding chances, this is again, not accelerator necessarily, but even like getting funding, your chances are increased by 25%, which to me is insane. If something as simple as a good pitch can help you, just really increase your chances of getting into an accelerator, getting funding.
And Donna, that's a great point. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
But a lot of the things that we're talking about here today apply to an application process, apply to a pitch, apply to fundraising. Almost all this, you can sub in the word fundraising for pitch or for application process, and it's relevant.
Yep, 100%. And, just a little bit more like last thing on the pitch before I move off of the pitch, but it is so, so important. I think also, really focus on storytelling, right? I think sometimes pitches, because you are the expert and when you're pitching, you really want to get into like the weeds and the technicalities. And at the end of the day, your audience is, not necessarily going to be as knowledgeable about your product as you. So tell more of a story, right? Really address the problem, the solution in a very storytelling kind of a manner versus just getting like super technical or deep into the product right off the bat. So really focus on storytelling. I think that really resonates with the person who's listening to your pitch.
Yeah, just one more thing to add on that, Donna. One of my favorites is, I don't know if everybody heard, this is going back probably 20 years ago, but the founder of eBay, the reason he founded it was because, and I don't even know if the story is true, but this is lore, Silicon Valley lore. I think it was his wife collected Pez dispensers. And most people on this call probably know what Pez is, but Pez is a little candy dispenser and they have like a cartoon character head on top. I grew up on them. They're very cool. But couldn't find where to collect Pez dispensers for his wife. So he created eBay to be that outlet for it. So that story obviously resonated with me 20 years later. If you have a background story of that, it plays right into what Donna's saying about the storytelling, and people remember that and people want to help that company.
Yeah. And if you guys want to have a separate session on storytelling, pitching, let us know. But also NASDAQ Center has so many resources on the website, so many videos on pitches and storytelling as well, if you want to take a look. So again, I'm going to switch gears a little bit again and really talk about collaboration, right? Again, a not much talked about topic when you're applying to accelerators. So when you're part of an accelerator, you're applying to an accelerator, you're not the only company in the accelerator. You're a part of a cohort. So it could be 4, 6, 20, depending, like Y Combinator is just like YC's gone completely crazy right now. But you're not alone and you're the only one. And that's also the beauty of the accelerator, that you feed off of the energy of the other companies in the cohort. So do accelerators consider the potential for partnerships or synergies with other startups in the cohort when they're evaluating the applications? And can founders leverage any of this? Can they look at who else is applying and can they leverage that in their application and showcase a potential win-win, right, with other companies in the cohort?
So not so much in the application process per se, but once in the program, different programs are different. That's going to be an overlying theme when we're talking about different programs. But you mentioned YC. So YC has several hundred companies, and I think the last cohort they just graduated, over 60% were AI companies or Donna.ai. You know, it just everybody is AI now. Inevitably, I would expect that many of those companies collaborated in the program and came out the other side 1 + 1 = 3 kind of mentality. I'm sure many of them combine forces. I have an AI solution, you have an AI solution, maybe we're dealing with different industries, but this could work together much better. So collaboration coming out the other end is prominent in some programs. Some programs each company is very unique. And while there may be collaboration, so there's another accelerator, IndieBio, and part of their solution or their offering is wet labs. So their companies are all biotech, life science, food tech, and inevitably they're collaborating on site there. Not necessarily beforehand, but in the program and probably out the other side. So every program is different. There are collaboration possibilities. Some programs maybe drive companies to do that. And if you think about it, a lot of programs, and this is not NASDAQ because NASDAQ does not take equity, but a lot of the accelerators put a little bit of money in and take a decent chunk of equity out. So they want you to grow and be successful for the ROI just of their investment. So they'll recognize pretty early on that, you know what, you standalone is probably not going to be the one, but your buddy over here, Colin, he's got a pretty cool company that complements what you're doing. Why don't you guys get together? That happens a lot. And I think we'll see more and more of that, especially with the specializations. So AI is not necessarily specialization, but it's the flavor of the month. There's some accelerators that specialize in a particular area, and it's natural there'll be collaboration amongst the cohort.
Yeah, and I think you said it really well, that it's hard to know who else is in the cohort, and so maybe not during the application process. But one thing I think I would recommend is research the accelerator ahead of time, right? You don't want to apply to every single accelerator on the planet. I read this 188 now, which is already insane. You don't want to apply to all 188. It's crazy. But to the one, so since you're being selective, and you should be selective, you should really research the accelerator, right? Look at what past companies they have invested in, that have been part of their cohort, and really reference that, similar to that company that you had in your previous cohort or previous 5 cohorts. We can help partner with them. And of course, you want to make sure the company's still around. So really research your cohort, research your accelerator and look at the previous cohorts and use that and leverage that in your application. It also shows intent, right? That you've really researched the accelerator.
Absolutely.
So similar to collaboration, the power of networks can be invaluable, right? So how can founders leverage their own networks or their own partnerships or connections that they have to strengthen their application and increase their chances of acceptance?
So in this situation, when I hear the word partnership, I think of it in two ways. First of all, as part of your team, if you have advisors, you have maybe academic advisors that have helped you along the way. Don't be shy about putting their profiles into your application, into your deck. Of course, get their permission, but those industry experts add value to you as a team, as a company. Don't be shy about putting them in. They're a real value add, and hopefully they're helping you out to grow your company. The other thing I think about when I think about partnerships is go-to-market partners. So I work for KPMG. We do a lot of software implementations and go-to-market with the Oracles, the SAPs of the world. If you have partnerships like that at an early stage, certainly highlight that in your application. That gives you instant street cred because you have somebody else that believes in what you're doing to the point that they are putting effort, money, time into what you're doing and going to market together. That's powerful, and that should be highlighted in your application when you're pitching the accelerator.
Yeah, and again, I would also add mentors, right? Really leverage your mentors. And I think that's something that I learned a lot from the Milestone Maker program at NASDAQ. As a mentor, I can really add a lot of value to my mentees pitch for an accelerator. And I have a bunch of mentees who've been part of a bunch of accelerators successfully. So also leverage your mentors. You'll be surprised that they will go the extra mile because they are your mentors. So just like partnerships or your existing network, don't forget your mentors. I think they are incredibly valuable towards in your application process. So let's talk a little bit about unconventional paths. We talked about Dollar Shave Club and how it was pretty unconventional in terms of the marketing and the approach. But again, not every successful entrepreneur follows your typical textbook path, right? So other examples that you've seen where startups have defied the odds with their innovation vision or approach, or they don't fit the cookie cutter template or guidelines that an accelerator has. So what if they don't tick all the traditional boxes? What advice would you give them when they're applying?
Yeah, and there's going to be more companies like that than ones that check all the boxes. It's just inevitable. You're starting out, you're building a company. There's certain things that you prioritize or you have in your bag. So how do you move to the top of the pile, so to speak? And I always come back to, you have to be able to sell it. You have to be able to articulate your vision, articulate your market, and articulate your solution. Sell, sell, sell. That is the key here. And I mean, this goes without saying, but every entrepreneur is actually chief sales officer. It's just what you're doing. You're selling to customers, you're selling to investors, you're selling to advisors and mentors, always selling. So you have to be able to sell it, especially if you're a little different animal than what they're looking for or what everybody else in line is. That's the only way you're going to stand out, is your ability to sell the vision.
I couldn't agree more, right? This is like so important. Every time I talk to an entrepreneur or a CEO, sorry, and they say, I hate sales. I'm not a salesperson. And I'm like, but you are. I mean, if you're going to be a CEO of a company or a founder of a company, you are a salesperson, whether you like it or not. Like you said, you're selling your vision, you're selling your ideas, right? You're selling your leadership to the people you're hiring. I mean, you're always selling. So I couldn't agree more how important that is. And also, I think one thing I would add is if you're not, ticking all the boxes and not following the cookie cutter mold, which is probably a good thing, actually, you might want to highlight that. You actually might want to highlight that as well as other things like tenacity or grit, right? Those are things that I think I would look for in an accelerator pitch over, okay, this person is just checking all the boxes. So yeah, definitely highlight your differences, in fact, I would say, and show things like grit and tenacity, which make you different or stand out. Cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about financials, not going back to the cookie cutter thing. How important are financials and growth projections in the application process? Especially as a startup, you might not have a ton of data. You might not have a ton of traction. And this really stumps most founders, right? That it's chicken and egg. Like, I'm asking you for, to be part of your accelerator so that I can have traction. And now you're asking me to show you financials and growth. So how do you really balance that as a founder when you're applying?
Yeah, so first of all, every accelerator is different. And obviously, financials are different for if you're coming in with just a concept versus coming in with minimum viable product, MVP, versus coming in a later stage accelerator where you're expected to have some traction and actually have some revenue. So that aside, projections are an interesting dance because on the one hand, if you come in super conservative and say, oh, this is probably a $50 million industry and we hope to dominate it. Well, that's not compelling, honestly. And again, putting on the investor hat, nobody's going to write you a check to invest in that company. On the other side, if you come in and I have a food tech company and the US market for food is $30 trillion and my plant-based sardines, if I only get 1% of that market, it's what's the math there? A $300 billion market. Well, that doesn't fly either. So you got to center that, and you have to be reasonable. You have to be thoughtful. What is your addressable market? Reasonably, the old TAM, SAM, SOM. What is your market you're addressing, and reasonably, what percentage of it are you going to be able to take in 2 years, in 5 years, in 20 years, and be able to articulate that.
100%. And also, I think going back to the whole storytelling, right? You don't have to have, definitely you need the market sizing, but you don't need to show fake traction, right? You don't need to show these ridiculous, like today you're making 0, but you're showing in a year you're going to make $10 million. Like it just doesn't compute, right? And without showing a clear path to that 10 million and then 50 and then 100 million. A lot of accelerators, the selection committees know this is all sort of made up. So what I would really focus on, instead of just showing sort of fake made up hockey stick growth numbers that you can't really back up today, what I would really focus on is just simple things, right? So say you have talked to 100 users, show that you've spoken to those 100 users and that they have validated your idea. You have 5 people using your product, just 5. Get testimonials from those 5 and actually put those testimonials up. Even those small things, that with a good story, a compelling story, is going to take you a long way. And me as a selection committee member is going to be more impressed with that than these fake hockey stick growth numbers that you're like exactly what Jules said, right? Like, how are you saying your TAM is $100 billion market when it doesn't make sense?
Yeah, great point. And you brought up something that I really like, the customer testimonials. There's another accelerator called Alchemist, and a lot of their pitches. Have you heard their pitches, Donna? I don't know what percentage. I think it's more than half. They lead their pitches on their formal demo day with a customer testimonial, and some aren't that good because you are asking this third party to talk on your behalf, and they may or may not be polished. But sometimes it's really compelling, and I've often gone back and talked to those companies where they had that customer testimonial, and I'm just like, that makes perfect sense. That's a great use case. I believe in this company. I want to learn more. So that's on the one hand side. One other point I want to make about the projections and such, something I said earlier. Generally, the accelerator is putting some money in, and they're an equity holder in this business. So you have to be able to think from an ROI perspective on the market you're addressing and what is the ultimate results for that. They're an investor. So they're an accelerator, but they're also an investor, and they need to see a return. So the projections have to address that in your process.
100%. So that dovetails perfectly into my next question for you, Jules, which is, what are the common mistakes and pitfalls that applications should avoid? I'm sure there's many. I have made them too, and I've applied to accelerators in the past. No one's immune. So, but from your learning and your past experiences, what are some common mistakes and pitfalls that you've seen that our applicants should avoid while applying to accelerators?
So we've touched on many of them already. One point you made earlier, which is a great one, is do your research. How many accelerators do you say there are? 188?
88, yeah.
So many are kind of vanilla, generic. Many are like a YC. If you can get a YC, it still carries a lot of cachet, and it should be a goal for a lot of entrepreneurs. But I would call them a generalist. But there are other accelerators that are focused. I mentioned IndieBio, which is more on the life science and the food tech side. There's some others like Techstars has individual cohorts that are specific to an industry based on sponsors they have. So I'm making this up, but let's say their sponsor is a paper manufacturer. They want to find startups that are focused on paper. So do your research is the point. Know if there is a particular accelerator that focuses on the industry you're addressing. That's key for you. You should go after that. But if it's more of a general one, going to an earlier point, do they take early stage companies? Are you an early stage company? Do they prefer later stage? Well, I'm an earlier stage company. Maybe not the right fit. So do your research on that. Another one, again, we touched on this before, is have your pitch down. This is your entree into this. Don't screw that up. Not to put pressure on, but it's really important. And the pitches that are tight and sharp and articulated, they're going to rise to the top in any sort of analysis of companies. And same goes for your application. Donna, I love you said it a couple times, but have a story. Make sure it resonates with people. Make sure you are identifying a problem in an industry, hopefully that you know, and it relates. And one of my biggest points, I was going to save this to the end, but I'm going to drop this now. The old adage, don't assume it makes an ass out of you and me. Don't assume that your reader, your listener knows your industry as well as you do. Really dumb it down and articulate it well at what is the problem I am seeing and addressing and solving. And that's going to go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite term that I think there was somebody who coined it a few years back was KISS, like keep it simple, stupid, like just keep it simple. That's it. No, agreed. And I think we've talked about a lot of like do's and don'ts already, but I think I'm gonna also add one for once you submit the application. A lot of people forget the small things, right? For example, follow up, right? After submitting your application, follow up with the accelerator to show continued intent and continued interest. And people think, oh, once like the application's gone, it's like in the ether, it's one and done. But no, you actually should follow up. And there's so many times I've seen people not do that. And also prepare for your interviews, right? Whether you get in or not, take that time while you're waiting to prepare for the interviews, because the application is just one part of it, right? The submission. Then you have to go for the interview process for most accelerators today. So if you get shortlisted, be prepared for an in-depth interview where you go deeper into like a lot of the core areas that we've talked about today. So whether you get in or not, just prepare for the interviews. And it's going to be good for you anyways, because those things that you're going to prepare for are going to help you with pitching to a partner, pitching to an investor.
Donnie, you bring up a great point, which I hadn't thought of before, but it makes perfect sense. Do your due diligence. The programs, unless it's a first-time program, there's people that have gone through it already. Do your research. Maybe you have a connection, a second-level LinkedIn connection to a company that was on it. They probably have it on their website that they went through the program because it's a badge of honor. Reach out to them and say, hey, how was your experience? Do you remember what were the keys to getting in? Was there anything that you did that maybe you wouldn't have done? Talk to people. People love talking about this stuff. Don't be shy about reaching out to strangers and asking about their process.
Exactly. And I see this all the time. So I'm part of a bunch of startup groups, and I see so many people posting on these groups and forums saying, hey, has anybody heard of Alchemist, or has anybody heard of XYZ? Nobody asks about YC, obviously, but has anybody heard of this, Astia? And what do you guys think about it? So, ask, right? People will be more than happy to help out. They've probably gone through the same experience. They can spend some time with you. And there's a lot of platforms, and I'm happy to post it in the chat as well, like Seed Crunch, that you've got Crunchbase, you've got Gust. So all of these publish rankings of accelerators based on multiple factors. And this can be really helpful for you to start your research. And then one last point is start early. These take time. I keep saying like applying to accelerators and fundraising is a full-time job for a founder, along with your real full-time job that you have. So start early. You will run out of time before you know it. It takes time, like it takes a lot of thought and time. So just start early. And the more knowledge you have ahead of time and people you ask for help is better.
Yeah, two other points on this subject. You don't have to pick the one that is perfect for you only. I mean, you should apply to that one. You should apply to multiple, and it's okay to go through multiple. Each has a little value. At some point, there's a lot of overlap, but don't be shy about going through several. Again, it's a badge of honor that you went through that program, and so do it. It's great training for you. Second thing is, I have this conversation a lot with entrepreneurs. Don't get hung up on the equity number. Some of them take a decent size percentage. I always tell founders when I'm talking to them about their next funding round, and they're hesitating on the dilutional, and 100% of zero is zero if that's where the company goes. So just because one is asking for 6% and one is asking for 5%, what is the right value? What is the right fit for you, regardless of that part of it?
Yeah, that's a whole different topic that I love, right?
It
Love
is.
valuations. Oh my God, I can talk ad nauseum about it. Just like the number of times founders ask me, like, but don't you think I'm giving up too much? I'm like, or anyway, we can talk about valuations another time. I do want to, I know I really want to save time for the audience questions because I feel like that's the most valuable. But I'm going to ask you just two more questions. One, I do want to talk a little bit about diversity. So essentially, how do you balance, a lot of accelerators are really leaning in on getting more diverse founders in. So how are they balancing that with the old school way of thinking of high performance? Not that, one is different from the other, but how do you think that diversity is playing a role in today's accelerator applications?
So there continues to be an endemic problem in tech, in VC, in startups with a lack of diversity. It's the is a terrible. This is the wrong thing to say. It's the white elephant in the room. But it is a problem, and the only way we're going to solve that, or at least edge forward to more diversity in these companies and in these industries, is starting right here. So I think it's great that accelerators like NASDAQ have an emphasis on diversity and people of color and women. And, that's my main comment to you is it's important. Now, having said that, I am a white male, and there are times when I see these listings and I'm like, well, what about me? So it's a little bit of a balancing act, and you never want to hear about somebody who is not in a diverse group not being invited to something when they clearly should be, or they should be a candidate. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, but my main response is I think it's great, and we got to keep doing it because it's going to lead to more leadership in technology in VCs that look more like society.
Exactly. And again, not to beat this horse to death, but truly, I think Anna's already posted a bunch of resources, but truly research, right? Like if you really, I mean, I love that the NASDAQ Milestone Maker program has a cohort only for women. I absolutely love that. And so, definitely do your research and learn more about the accelerator you're applying to, because you definitely want to have somebody that's the right fit for you. All right, last question before we open it up to the audience is, Jules, for you, if there was one thing you want the audience to take away from today, what would that be?
I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs, and they are so in the weeds on their company. Everything is right here, and they're not thinking widely. So short answer is always assume that you are pitching to a fifth grader. Dumb it down, not that fifth graders are dumb, but just bring it down to a level that your audience will understand, because you are an expert in it and you're going to use terminology, you're going to make assumptions that maybe does not resonate with your audience. I know when I'm in that situation on the other side of the conversation, I'm starting to, my brain is moving like, oh, did he mean this or did she mean that? And I'm missing the message that's coming up. So dumb it down. There was that show, which I never saw, but it was like competing with a fifth grader. Pretend like you're talking to a fifth grader.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think mine really would be lean in on your mentors. It's just invaluable. It's an underutilized tool, I would say, or in your toolbox or a resource. And I just saw some stat recently from Google for startups, which said 49% of startups attribute their success to mentorship from experienced individuals, right? So don't go it alone. It is a lonely journey. Even applying to accelerators is a lot of work. So definitely find a great mentor or a team of mentors for this. So with that, Colin, I'm going to hand it over to you for Q&A.
Amazing. Well, what a great way to wrap this session. You guys have covered the entire gamut of all the best practices. And as our Milestone Makers application committee review members, shared a lot of great insights. So thank you so much. For those of you who haven't dropped questions in the Q&A box, this is the time to do so. You've got two of our experts who have got a lot to share. One question that I get often from Milestone Makers applicants and people within the program is, how do you create a fine balance for our impact-driven entrepreneurs in an application and writing between the social or environmental impact to the financial outcomes that that you're actually like looking for? So is there a balance there that either of you are looking for?
Ronnie, you want to go first?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question? I was busy
I'll go
typing
first. I'll go
response.
first.
I'm so
Yeah. No, all good. Jules, you're up.
Yeah. So it's a good question. Again, I've been working with Colin and the team for a long time, and I struggle with it a little bit because end of the day, I'm a business person and I look through the lens of, is this a viable business that I think is going to be profitable and do really well versus the, what was the terminology used, Colin? Basically changing the world stuff, the .org stuff. That's kind of how I refer to it. It's a balance. And I know for me as a judge in those or an applicant reviewer, I will often migrate towards the business side. It's just a fact of where my head is. So it's a tough balance. I think if you have a solution that is for the greater good, if you can find a way to make it a good, viable business too, that's the key to it. It's important, but ultimately we're talking about viable businesses, and that's the lens I look at it.
Totally.
Yeah, and I apologize. I was responding to one of the questions that was on the chat. So I think it's a great question, right? And this is one that I think most of us grapple with. I would go back to the balance for me is start with a story that gets to somebody's heartstrings, right? And it's a true problem that you've experienced or someone that has experienced. I think makes it even more relevant. I think start with the story, go down that path first, and then show validation, right? Show, actual testimonials. Again, I said this before as well, but show proof that this is a true need. And, 50% of your job is done. And then you do want to back it up with how are you going to fund this? But start with the why in this case first. A lot of times, if it's just a pure for-profit, I would just go with the financials, SAM. But with this one, I would go with the story and then back it up with how we are going to fund it and or make money.
Both of that are great points. And from our lens, like we want to support entrepreneurs regardless of the stage of their journey, their outcome, their industry, their impact focus. But at the end of the day, you still need money coming in the door. Whether you're a nonprofit, for-profit, impact-driven company, you still need customers to keep the lights on. So that financial piece, especially what Jules was talking about, is important. But the story is also equally important of why you're doing what you're doing and why you care about it. Another question here. How should early stage founders pre-seed think about accelerators versus angel funding? Donna, I'm going to kick this one over to you. And then Jules, if you have anything to add.
This is a tough one for me to answer only because I angel invest very actively and heavily. So I'm going to think about this a little bit. It's a very good question, actually. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. I don't think it's either or. You can do both. Right? You can go after angel investors in parallel while applying to accelerators. So it's not an either or. Having said that, really just know what your goals are, right? If you have a great network already of angels, then you don't maybe need to go through the accelerator route. But if you really, so really get your goal right. And if your goal is to network and get the connections, then, and you don't have any, I would for sure apply to an accelerator. And again, different accelerators do different things, right? For example, YC is very different from, say, an Alchemist, from an Astia. So it all really depends on your goal. But if you have an existing network, I would say start with the angel investors, and it's not an either or at all.
Yeah, that was going to be my response. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not either or. You can do both. You can do them in parallel. You can do one first, then the other. I know if you have angel investment and you are applying to an accelerator, I think it adds to your story. Like somebody believes in you already. They've written you a check. We want to have you in our program. So it's a value add. Whereas the accelerators are helping with the business model. They're helping with the MVP, whatever it is that the goal is of the accelerator. So they're kind of parallel is the right way to do it. And one can help the other, going both ways. I think angels like to see that you went through an accelerator and you learned all this stuff and you had these mentors. So do them both.
Amazing. And as mentors for our milestone makers, there's a question here. If this is outside of the acceleration, but I think it's an interesting data point here that we can touch on is if you aren't in this environment, what are some of your advice on getting to places and spaces to find mentors to get them interested in helping you out? Jules?
So you're saying outside of the formal programs?
Yeah, like if you don't have somebody like me assigning you, like where do you think people should go to find folks to get them interested in supporting them?
There's a lot of resources, a lot of sources, especially if you're in the Bay Area. I think our audience is all over the world, but I'll just give an example. I went to an event last night. It was a meetup in Palo Alto, and it was a mix of entrepreneurs and people like myself that just from industry. And if you are truly looking for, hey, I am looking for a mentor that has experience in marketing, you can go to those things and meet people. You also should tap into your own network, family and friends, and say, hey, I'm really looking for somebody. I'm looking for legal help. I'm looking for somebody that knows how to go overseas with a product. Just start talking about it. Inevitably, people are going to say, oh, my cousin Vinny, he does that. So don't be shy about talking about what you're doing and talking about the holes that you have and that you're looking to fill. People love to help, especially if it's family and friends and there's an emotional attachment there. Don't be shy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think events is a great piece of advice, like place to go look for mentors. I do agree, Jules. I mean, and after a talk or a webinar, you can actually go up to the person and ask them to be a mentor, very like in the right way. And one thing I would do is don't like say, hey, would you be my mentor? You really want to develop a relationship.
Yeah.
You want to get to know them and say, hey, I would love to just have a coffee with you or a chat, or are you ready to spend some time talking to me? Start small, because if I don't know you at all, just you asking me to be a mentor would be a bit odd. But the events is really relevant, where you can go and like start building a relationship with thought leaders in your space. The other place I would also go to is LinkedIn. I mean, you have probably an incredible network through your own one-on-one connections or through your friends' friends or your LinkedIn connections, and really just do a cold reach out sometimes, and just say, this is what I'm doing and I would love your help. And don't ask for somebody to be a mentor first, but LinkedIn is an amazing, amazing resource to find really good mentors.
All really good points. And Donna, yeah, you touched on the thing that I was going to say is like when approaching somebody, what's the inappropriate way to ask, like for help? Like, will you be my mentor? You're great. Yeah. But yeah, developing the relationship. And then another thing on LinkedIn, just a word of advice, because I'm sure we all get this. But somebody from a completely different industry of you says, hey, I see we're in the same industry and I would love to connect. Right. So do your homework is my guess, because too often I get like, people who want to like paint, our building that's not our building, right? So,
We could have a whole session on LinkedIn etiquette, which I'm happy to participate in because I have a lot of opinions about it.
I love that. I don't know if either of you has a position on this. Donna, maybe a little bit of advice here, but how is applying for accelerators for different than grants?
Really, really good question again. Wow, really good questions. Quite similar yet quite different. Grants are, well, let me start with accelerators, right? Accelerators are, again, huge number of accelerators. Accelerators are very much not just cash. They give you mentorship. They connect you with cohorts, that are in with other cohort companies in their cohort. It's just a whole holistic sort of supporting cocooning network, right? That's going to get you ready for the next stage of your company. So when you're applying, you're thinking of all those things, like your goals, and that your application is tailored towards those goals and for that accelerator. Grants, on the other hand, for the most part, right, it's really going to give you money. And a lot of times grants are very much mission based. So if you're a B Corp, for an example, or if you're applying for government grants, it's very much mission based and less on the actual economics or the financials. So for an accelerator, I would say, think more about the goals and the whole community aspect around it, as well as the financial aspect. But for the grants, it's really more of the story and the mission. That's really my big differentiator, I would say.
Yeah, I'll just
Amazing.
chime in. I consider it apples and oranges. Donna described the value of the accelerators. I'll leave that alone. The grants, it's government driven, it's mission driven, and it's arduous. There's a whole process to it. It's not a matter of, hey, I'd love to get a grant from you. There's a whole process. There's a whole cottage industry on how to raise grant money. So it's a thing. I just talked to a company the other day that is a for-profit company, and they got advice to start a .org so that they could be eligible for grants, and then somehow migrate the business that they developed through the .org into a for-profit. I was like, come on, really? We're crossing streams here. It's not good.
Okay. Lightning round, because we're almost at time, but I want to hear your last 2 points on this. So brevity or lengthy detail, which do you prefer in an application review environment?
Brevity.
Donna?
Oh, go ahead, Jules.
Okay.
Brevity. Generally, if you can articulate your point in the fewest words possible, that's going to rise to the top for me.
Could not agree more. Brevity all the way.
Amazing. Well, we are at time. Donna, Jules, what a great conversation. Thank you for all you do for the center, but of course, thanks for joining us today to share some of your insights on this. For those of you on, check out the Global Tech Innovator Competition that KPMG hosting. We have had Milestone Makers grads go through this process and said it has tremendous value. So I really appreciate, of course, Donna and Jules helping strengthen that process. And for everyone on, appreciate you coming, and hopefully you can join us for our future programs. We look forward to welcoming you back online soon. Jules, Donna, thanks again.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. Bye.